As y'all know, I always try and put together different type of content to, unique content to try and get your attention. And the fact of the matter is, this is by far one of the most unique pieces of content that I've done. The fact of the matter is, I've seen about 3 or 4 mock drafts at this point, and I think that me myself, I can do it too, or at least I'm going to try my best to put together an interesting and unique mock draft from my perspective as somebody who knows a little bit, but not a lot, about the NFL. With that being said, I think we can all agree that even after the combine and even after everything, Caleb Williams is still the consensus first overall pick. And Caleb Williams will be going to the Chicago Bears to become the new quarterback in Chicago. And though DJ Moore might be disappointed because DJ Moore liked um, Caleb Williams, Justin Fields, I think Caleb Williams is the right choice because also it would allow the Bears to have somebody at quarterback starting on a rookie type, an entry level deal or a rookie deal, and that it would give them more time before having to pay them. But I think that the Chicago Bears are not the only ones that are going to get that opportunity, as I think Caleb Williams and Drake May are still pick 1 and pick 2. Now we move to our friends in New England, and honestly, the one thing I think everyone can agree on is that the depth at quarterback in this position in this draft is unlike any other draft in the last couple of years. But I still think that even after all this time, Heisman Trophy winner Jaden Daniels is still the favorite to go number 3, unless Drake May somehow drops down and the Commanders don't go for the quarterback or the Bears don't go for a quarterback. I think Jaden Daniels will be the one that goes to the Patriots, but I think at least now the top 3 picks in this year's draft are going to be quarterbacks. Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and of course Caleb Williams. And I think that consensus wise, Marvin Harrison Jr. is number 4. I know there was talk after the combine that JJ McCarthy could go number 4, but I think that Marvin Harrison Jr. will be number 4 in this year's draft as he is the top wide receiver, and getting Kyler Murray some tools to go along with whoever else they might have, just to get him some tools to where it takes some of the pressure off Kyler Murray, and getting one of the best receivers of our generation. Common consensus is that I think that is the best pick for the Arizona Cardinals in this spot. And I know that there's a lot of options here. There are a lot of options here for the Chargers. The Chargers could trade back. The Chargers could do this. They could do that. The Chargers could do a lot of things. But the fact of the matter is, I think that based on what we know about Jim Harbaugh and how he ran the 49ers, the fact that he will have his eyes on free agency, and yes, the Chargers could use Marvin Harrison Jr. too, but Brock Bowers being what Brock Bowers is as far as a tight end and one of the best tight ends, I think that Brock Bowers goes to I don't know, I was going to say San Diego, but Los Angeles. I think that's where Brock Bowers is going to head off. And now the big question is, what do I think for the Giants? I know that there's a lot of people that figured, based on the combine, that J.J. McCarthy would move up into the top 10 or even into the top 5. I do think J.J. is going to move up and I think that this is where JJ is going to move up. I know that the report was that the Giants are done with Danny Dimes, and they want nothing to do with Daniel Jones. They have a little bit of buyer's remorse. I don't know if that's accurate. That's the thing I heard. And if I was the Giants, I would feel the same way. But hear me out. Hear me out. Give Danny Dimes the opportunity. One more year. What do you have to lose giving him one more year? And the reason why I say that is because it would give JJ McCarthy or a draft pick the opportunity to learn under Danny Dimes and not have all the pressure in the world, and then in 2025 have him take over. Or even, I mean, or even if you're anticipating that maybe you could trade him. Maybe put together Danny Dimes and a seventh round pick or a fourth round pick, or something like that. And because there's a lot of teams that are desperate for quarterbacks, but I don't know if you'll be able to get rid of them. Either way, JJ McCarthy, in effect, going to the Giants and sitting under the learning tree for a year, you know, I don't think it's a bad idea. I don't think it's a bad idea, him sitting under the learning tree. I will say, I think JJ McCarthy going to the Giants or going to the Falcons is something that could be ideal. But I think that if there's any team that is going to go for a quarterback off of free agency, it will be the Atlanta Falcons, as Kirk Cousins seems to be one of those ideal landing spots, as is Justin Fields. So we could see a trade where the Falcons, if anybody, get their quarterback. In which case, I think JJ McCarthy could fall to the Vikings or the Broncos. But with that being said, let's head off to the Titans and see what we can get for the Tennessee Titans, which I think, with what they have with Will Levis, they need to get him some tools in this area. And with how highly touted the wide receiver draft class is, I think this is where the Titans will draft LSU wideout Malik Nabers. And now we move to the Atlanta Falcons. And I think honestly, um I was going to say maybe a trade, but with that, I think that the Falcons could use some assistance in other positions. Based on analysis, they think that Dallas Turner is somebody that could go to the Falcons. But let's go down here. I think that Dallas Turner would be a good draft pick, especially the only reason why Dallas Turner would be an ideal pick for the Falcons here is because I firmly believe that the Falcons will get somebody either in a trade or free agency for their draft pick. I mean, for their quarterback to replace Desmond Ridder as the everyday quarterback. What I will say is that if Kirk Cousins does come in, it would be another ideal situation to have a young quarterback sit under the learning tree and learn for a year. Tell him to sit under the learning tree, learn for a year. And learning from a veteran like Kirk Cousins could help Desmond Ridder in the following year. With this, I think this is where we go for a defender for the Chicago Bears. And I feel like I've heard this term used when I'm watching other mock drafts, and I credit football analysis for that. But when a person like Cooper DeJean out of Iowa falls into your lap, you know you got to take it. You know you got to take it. And honestly, with if Joe Alt is here, and with the desperation that the Jets need or the Jets have at offensive line, I think somebody like Joe Alt falling into their laps, it is not something that they can pass up. So I would go with Joe Alt as the Jets draft pick. Pretty easy draft picks for the Jets and the Chicago Bears. And now with what I said earlier, I think that I think that there's a possibility. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a possibility that the Vikings, the Broncos, or the Raiders could go for a draft pick, could go for a quarterback here. But I also think that one of them, with the Russell Wilson free, the Broncos are in desperate need for a quarterback. But with Russell Wilson free, that also opens the door for Russell Wilson to go to the Vikings, to go to the Eagles. I mean, to go to the Patriots, to go to the Raiders, to go to the Bears. To go to the Falcons, Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins. The list goes on and on and on about potential quarterbacks. Hell, Baker Mayfield could go somewhere else and not go back to the Buccaneers. But the fact of the matter is, what does that do for Bo Nix and the rest of the quarterback market? I don't know that Michael Penix Jr. will be a first round pick. I also don't know that the guy with the fastest throw or the biggest throw in Joe Milton will be a first round pick. But what I can say is them working on other positions could be something for them. And I think this is where D lineman Byron Murphy II will head off to Minnesota and give Minnesota a little help on the defensive line. And now with the Broncos, and here's my logic. Though I don't think the Vikings will get Justin Fields, I don't rule out the possibility of the Broncos and the Vikings both drafting a quarterback. But I think that if there's anything that we can look from the draft, it is that the Raiders and the Vikings will pay somebody in free agency, whether it be Russell Wilson, whether it be trading for Justin Fields, whether it be Kirk Cousins, whomever. I think that will be likely what happens, and that the Broncos will be the one of these three picks to draft a quarterback, and not the Vikings and the Raiders. With that being said, and the fact that I just said what I said about the Raiders not drafting a quarterback, I think that they're going to go for an offensive lineman. And I think that they will go. Honestly, I don't know if they will go for Jerzon Newton or Jackson Powers Johnson. I honestly think I honestly think that they would go Jackson Powers Johnson here. I could be wrong. Don't criticize or critique me too hard because this is the first time I'm actually doing a mock draft because this is the first time I actually know enough, in my opinion, to be able to do it. But I know if there's anything that has been consistent over the last 14 picks or 13 picks, it is the fact that I have sat here and said that I'm a fan of people getting drafted to sit under the lemon tree and learn for a year. But I don't think that that's what the Saints will do, getting a quarterback here to draft to sit behind Derek Carr. I think that if anything, they will draft Mr. Newton out of Illinois to go on the defensive line. Um, or Talesi Fuaga. I think that now it's just down to what I like better or who I like better. I honestly think that Mr. Fashanu will go to New Orleans at pick 14. Now, Indianapolis could pick from the very large overabundance of receivers, but with the amount of problems they have on defense, whether it's the O line or the defensive line, I think that picking somebody to go on the offensive line if Jackson Powers Johnson is still there, I think Jackson Powers Johnson could go to Indianapolis. But I think, and here's the big deal. I think that I think that Indy will finally pick Mr. Newton. I know that Jerzen Newton is somebody that I went around for a couple of picks actually, but I think that Indianapolis is the right place for him to go. Now we move to Seattle. I just also want to point out that I think that New Orleans, along with Atlanta, are two picks or are two teams that I think could be trading back in the draft. And I think that Denver it could be a team that moves up. And I also think that I know there was another team that I think could move up. I think that. Did I go past them? Oh, the Giants. I do think that the Giants could move up too. Yeah, I think it could be Denver and it could be the Giants. But I also think that Indianapolis and Atlanta could be two teams that move back. And honestly, I would not be surprised if if Atlanta and Denver traded their picks where Atlanta moved back to pick 12. Because if Atlanta goes with Dallas Turner, edge defender, in the first round, they could move back to pick 12. But it's also the possibility that he might not be there. That's the risk of moving back. speaking of edge defender, Jared Verse, every time I say his name, anytime I play in Madden, I always call him Jared Verse. Jared Verse will go to Seattle here at pick 16. And, I know that this is where people say information, whatever the case is. With the lack of knowledge with the little bit of knowledge that I have, I think that helps to a degree because I'm not overthinking the picks. But at the same time, I'm not able to share as much depth in information as other people would. But at the same time, I don't know that I don't want to say I don't know that I'm not helping, but I think I'm making good choices. I think I'm making good choices. And speaking of good choices, I think right here for the Jacksonville Jaguars, if Laiatu Latu is still around in the draft here for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think going for an edge defender is exactly what these guys should do. Because having a talent like Laiatu Latu fall to them would be a gift that you can't pass up. Now, if I was the Bengals, I'd at least look around at other players and not jump at the first pick that could fall to us. Because I'd also consider um getting a receiver here because they did just lose Tyler Boyd, and with the uncertainty of T. Higgins, it may not be the worst thing in the world, especially with the depth that is in the draft, but also with the depth that is in the draft, you may not have to draft somebody here with your first round pick. So if that's the case, then we go D-line, and we look at the D-line, but with also noticing something out of the ordinary here at pick 18, if Rome Odunze is still here, or Brian Thomas Jr. for that matter, if either of these two kids are still here, I think that is something that the Bengals would have to consider, even if they may not want to get a wide receiver first in the first round. I think with their uncertainty, with the future uncertainty for the team at receiver, with the future uncertainty for the team at receiver, it would be fitting for them to get a receiver because what happens if T. Higgins goes away next year? And also allowing a kid to sit and learn from two of the best in the league. Sit and allow a kid to learn from two of the best in the league. I don't think that there's any way you can measure up to that in any way, shape, or form. How simply put, worth it would be for someone to be able to learn from Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Now, I know that going back and forth, this is something that might be a little questionable, And the reason why it might be a little questionable is, do I draft the quarterback with the Los Angeles Rams? And I think that if Bo Nix falls out of the top 15, Bo Nix could go to Los Angeles here. As I've said multiple times, and I just said with the Bengals pick, allowing a youngster to sit under the learning tree and learn from one of the best in the game, it's never a bad thing. The fact of the matter is, having Matthew Stafford being somebody that you can learn from, I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think that would be a bad idea. But, again, much like a previous team, that being the Raiders, which I think the Raiders might be the only team that I actually made a mistake on the draft pick with. I think that there's some consideration to other picks. And I think with the way that the defense went for the Rams last year, I don't know why it was so hard for me to say it. I think improving that might not be the worst thing in the world for them. So we bring Nate Wiggins to the Rams. I mean, honestly, they're in a position where they could. Take that, but at the same time, our friends in Pittsburgh are also in the same need as the Rams for a cornerback. So I think we may see two cornerbacks going back to back with Quinyon Mitchell and Nate Wiggins going to the Rams and the Steelers respectively. Again, much like with the Bengals, the Dolphins are not in desperate need, so I would say look at the tight end position, see if there's anybody that jumps out at you, and if not, jump to the offensive line positions. And I want to say that Amarius Mims, J.C. Latham, and Talisa Fuaga, as well as Troy Fotano, there's a lot of options for the Dolphins here, and I think that Fuaga will finally come off the board at pick 21 again with the Miami Dolphins. Now, with the Eagles, there is a big hole after Jason Kelce retired. There is a big hole after Jason Kelce retired for the Eagles. But I also think that much like with the Kansas City Chiefs, the Eagles need help at wide receiver. And with the depth that is in this draft, and also a certain record holder still being here in Xavier Worthy, I think that a wide receiver will go, and the wide receiver depth will be killed off in the first round. I'm predicting that now. The wide receiver depth will be depleted in the first round, as the Eagles will go for Brian Thomas Jr. And now with the Houston Texans, I think if anything, the Houston Texans should go. I think if anything, the Houston Texans should get a veteran receiver in free agency, and not go for a veteran receiver here. Um, but that's just me. I think that's something that they should consider. And also, here's somebody that, for whatever reason, I mean, I'm thinking about a linebacker for them, but also with what I just said about the receiver core, I think that that is something that they should consider. But I'm going to go a little haywire here and draft Peyton Wilson, linebacker out of North Carolina State. I was going to draft Jeremiah Trotter Jr., but I think that the Texans are in a position where a veteran receiver would help them more than another rookie receiver. And I mean, they may defensive line, whatever the case is, but the fact of the matter is, I think going to linebacker would not be the worst thing in the world for them here. Now we go to the Cowboys, and I think that the one position that sticks out for me with the Cowboys is the one position that through the first 20 really wasn't depleted much, and that is cornerback. With Terrion Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry still here, I believe that the Cowboys will go with Kool-Aid McKinstry. And now we move over to the Green Bay Packers, and this is an easy pick, J.C. Latham. J.C. Latham will go to Green Bay. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, again, much like the Cowboys, will go for a cornerback and will go, if Terrion Arnold's still around, I think that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will not only go for a cornerback, but will go. I could also see the Buccaneers trading back. Honestly, I could also see the Buccaneers trading back because I think that the Bills may move up and try and get a receiver ahead of the Chiefs. Like, basically, the Bills will be contending with the Chiefs and the Ravens for some receiving help, and I think that I can see them moving up and switching with the Buccaneers, or even switching with the Colts if the Colts are certain that they will get who they want in the first round, even falling back to the bottom of the draft. I think that the Bills could move up in the draft. After drafting Mr. And if that's the case, I'm just going to put it out there. If that's the case and the Buccaneers do move back, then Terrion Arnold would go to Arizona instead of Tampa Bay. He would go to Arizona instead of Tampa Bay, but that's just me. I feel like, to a degree, I feel like um, the internal offensive line, centers and guards, are the least talked about in the draft, or have been the least talked about in the draft. But I think that, if anything, that the Arizona Cardinals may go for an offensive tackle, as the offensive tackle position seems to be a very healthy position in the draft, and it would leave Troy Fautanu or Amarius Mims, and not for anything worth considering, I would go for Troy Fautanu going to Arizona. And though Rome Odunze may have fallen a lot further in the draft than most people thought he would, falling to Cincinnati, I'm going with the same logic as the Bills need someone. The Bills need someone. And I think that the Bills will go for Bo Nix's receiver in Troy Franklin. They will go Bo Nix's receiver in Troy Franklin. The Detroit Lions will go for... Again, I want to also point out that even though I think Troy Fautanu was a good pick for the Cardinals, if the Buccaneers do trade back and the Cardinals do not go for a cornerback, I think Terrion Arnold could fall, or one of the leftover cornerbacks could fall to the Lions at pick 29, or the Lions could move up and switch with Arizona to pick Terrion Arnold at 29. Honestly, Rakestraw Jr. Enos Rakestraw Jr. or Rakestraw will go to the Detroit Lions at pick 29. Much like the Chiefs and the Bills, I believe that the Baltimore Ravens will get a receiver. And I think they will go with the more local kid in Ladd McConkey, as Georgia is closer to them than Texas is. And with the San Francisco 49ers, there is one offensive line tackle left, and that is Amarius Mims. Mims will go to the San Francisco 49ers, which then leaves the Kansas City Chiefs. And though there are other positions that the Chiefs could go for, the Chiefs could go tackle, they could go wide out, they could go defensive lineman, but I think Adonai Mitchell, I think Mr. Mitchell will be the one that gets drafted by the Chiefs to end out the first round. And I also just want to point out that the kid who set the record for the fastest 40-yard dash at the Combine, Xavier Worthy, will be the first-round pick of the second round with the Carolina Panthers. I will say, looking at it, there is no doubt in my mind that the top 4 picks will be that way. There is no doubt in my mind that Brock Bowers will go, most definitely, will go in the top 10. There is no doubt in my mind that Malik Nabers and Dallas Turner will both go in the top 10. And I know that there were some mistakes because of my lack of knowledge and the fact that I didn't necessarily do as much research as I probably should have before doing a mock draft, and I basically just winged it. But this is not the only mock draft I will do, as I will bring on some guests to help me better understand what teams need, why they need them, where they fit in, and maybe have a little bit better of an understanding after our second or third mock draft. But with that being said, this is what I believe is the mock draft for the 2024 draft, and I think that one of the teams that I made a mistake with was the Raiders. Not to say that Jackson Powers Johnson is a bad pick, but I'd also like to point out that Oregon is getting ripped apart, as is Alabama, in this draft, with Dallas Turner, Kool-Aid McKinstry, J.C. Latham, Terrion Arnold, all getting drafted. Georgia has a few people in the draft. Oregon has a few people in the draft, including their quarterback. But, like I said, I think that the Broncos, the Bills, and the Falcons could trade their draft pick. I'm not sure about the Giants. I'm going to take the Giants out of it. I do think the Buccaneers, the Bills, heck, I could see the Raiders maybe moving if they want to get a draft, if they want to draft a quarterback in the draft. I think that there is an outside chance that Michael Penix Jr. could go in the first round. I don't think that Joe Milton will go in the first round, even based on the hype of the combine. And I also don't think that the hype of the combine will positively or negatively affect J.J. McCarthy in any way, shape, or form. I know I have him going sixth, but if the Giants don't draft a quarterback, then it is most definitely that J.J. will go in that run from the from the Vikings to the Raiders, if not to the Falcons, because the Falcons could also move up and draft J.J. McCarthy at number 6. But I do firmly believe that the Falcons will pick Kirk Cousins or Justin Fields in the trade market / free agency. But I do think that the other team that I may have made a mistake with, was not New Orleans, Houston, because I don't know that picking a linebacker is the right choice at pick 23, and the same with pick 29 as Enos Rexstraw for the Lions. But I did my best, and I do like some of the picks. Like, I like Amarius Mims to the 49ers. I like Joe Alt to the Jets. And I also like Fashanu to the New Orleans Saints, Jared Verse to the Seahawks, J.C. Latham to the Packers. I don't think anybody likes one of the better cornerbacks going to the Cowboys, but I like the picks. I like a lot of the picks that I did. Let me know down in the comment section below what your thoughts on it. Remember, I'm still learning, so don't critique me too hard. But if you want to get me a better understanding of who I should have picked, so I know better for next time, I would appreciate it. With that being said, though, that is it for me, and I will see you in the next one.